Hello there, and welcome to the How to Market Your Horse Business podcast. I'm so glad you're joining us here today. Now, my name is Denise Alvarez. I get to host you here each week. And before we dive into the second part of my conversation with Stacy Westfall, I'm going to quickly introduce myself just in case for new friends. And then I promise you, friends, we will dive right in. Now, as I said, my name is Denise, and through my business, Storm Lily Marketing, I get to help dream-chasing horse business owners like yourself to ditch the marketing overwhelm, get the clarity they've been craving, and grow their business in a way that meets their definition of success. Now, I do this primarily through business coaching and then education, such as this podcast, and I have some online learning resources for you as well. All that I do, friends, is so that you, as an equestrian entrepreneur, can be out doing what you love to do in the equine industry. I know for some of you, you're in the barn. For some of you, you're in the arena. You're behind the computer. You're behind the camera lens. You're visiting veterinarians. You guys are all over the place. But what you're doing is building an equine business because you love horses and you love to serve the industry. And I want to help you do more of that. So here on this podcast, you'll get a mix of step-by-step strategies, essential how-tos, and entrepreneurial mindset shifts that will help you not only see what's possible for your business, but I'm also here to guide you through that process so you can make it happen. Now, as I said, today is a continuation of episode number 176. All right. So 175, if you have not listened to it yet, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the first part of Stacy telling her story and how she has gotten to the place where she's now, what's that looked like. Some of you may know her from years ago when she had a viral video, when viral video first started to even be a thing. And she wasn't trying to go viral. It was a video of her riding bridleless in her bridal gown, and it was beautiful. I will link to that in the show notes for today's episode. So if you head over to stormlily, LILY.com/176, then you'll get to see that video as well as a link to last week's episode in case you have not yet listened. And you'll also get, of course, access to my conversation, highlights and things, takeaways. All of that is on the show notes, okay? So if you are listening as you're driving, if you are multitasking like I often do as I am listening to podcasts, I want you to know that at any time you can go to the show notes and get all of the highlights of the conversation and the necessary links to follow up on what you wanted to learn, take away, those types of things. All right, now, again, back to what we were talking about, Stacy and that video that did happen to go viral. But that was just a small piece of her overall equestrian business building journey. And so today, what we are doing is diving into marketing and business and mindset and strategy and the real tangible things that are going to help you in your own business. Stacy's going to share some top marketing tips, but really she's going to share with you how she has approached social media in a unique way, podcasting, YouTube. She's done many things, but what I want you to hear is that she's doing many of these things and she's doing it herself. And that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. But for some of you, I know that you think it is not possible to do what you want until you've built out a team. And while that may be what is needed for you, it may also be that you just need some mindset shifts around marketing. You need some strategy shifts around marketing. And so I want you to go into this conversation with Stacy with an open mind and heart to see what may be helpful for you in your business so that you can engage your own audience on a deeper level. As I said, it's going to be mixed with practical and mindset and all the things in between. And truly, my heart is that you have some takeaways to build your business. So meet me at the end of this conversation with Stacy, and I'm going to give you some of the takeaways that I heard as we were talking that I hope will help you as you are building your own horse business. All right. Thanks so much for joining me here, friends. Without further ado, let's dive into the continuation of my conversation with Stacy. Okay, so I want to hear about your approach. So eventually you did embrace marketing, embrace that role. So initially you said you hired somebody to help you. And at some point you decided, I'm going to get in, get my hands dirty and do these things myself. So for those listening who maybe don't have a full understanding, well, I want to say a couple of things with this. Number one, I get your emails and I have for a while. I have followed what you're doing just from like, I love to study different horse businesses and how they're showing up in the world of marketing. And so you do market very authentically, and it's clear. I swear I heard you say this somewhere, but maybe not. You do all your own copywriting. Am I right
Yeah,
about that? Okay.
I do all. I do
Okay.
all of my podcasts. I do all of my videos. I do all of
Okay.
my all of it.
Yeah. So you're doing emails, you're doing your own podcast, and you produce that. But then what I also want people to hear is some permission as we talk about these things, that doesn't mean everybody needs to be doing everything 110%, because it's not like you're showing up daily on Instagram, or doing like a weekly Facebook Live, or doing this free Facebook group, right? When we say all, it means the things that you have selected. And this is one of the hearts of what I teach is success is subjective. And so you have decided, look, this is what success looks like for me and my business and my model. And for you, that is the podcast and email, and then the online things that you're doing. But talk to me about that process for you, kind of what it's been like, some things that you learned, and why you shared a little bit, but why it was so important to you to kind of be so hands-on with the marketing.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because to me, if you look and you go, oh, look, Stacy's been doing the horse thing for 30 years. That's such a high level view. You miss the fact that I've darn near pivoted my business every 4 to 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
like big time pivots. Like if I mapped it out, you could almost make an argument for it being different business models. So that's a lot of change, actually. That's a lot of change when you go to 4 to 5 years. And so, learning the marketing side, the first thing that came to my mind is, well, recognizing the difference between marketing and sales.
What would you say it is?
Well, I was actually dying to ask you since you're the expert, but if you force me to go first, I can.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, wait, yeah, I can go. Here's what I would say. In again, subjective, right? This is very subjective. Sales and marketing 100% go hand in hand. Marketing is messaging. Like the heart of marketing is the messaging, and the sales is the conversions. That's how I would really super, super simplify it. Now, I did work with a coaching client who told me, Denise, I feel like marketing is everything. And I'm like, yeah, 100%. Like all the things you're doing, it comes back to how you market your brand and what your messaging is. But the heart of it really is, how are you communicating the message of what you do and representing your brand? That's the marketing piece. And then sales is conversions. There's my simplistic definition.
I completely agree with you. And I lightly covered that in the horse expo story when I said, I stand in the middle of the arena, I ride, I freely give. This is my marketing. I go back to the booth. I answer all the questions. Groups of people can stand around and listen to me. It was basically a podcast, right? They can listen to me answer questions, and
Yeah.
they can stand there and listen to me answer 20 questions. That's all marketing. The sales, when they was like, if there was a natural thing that they were doing and I had a DVD that solved that problem, I would say, yeah, if you want, like, I will literally give you, now there's a line of people, so I've got about 5 minutes. I will give you the best of what I can in 5 minutes. And if you want the 2-hour version, here's the $39 DVD. And so I think I agree with you so strongly that I would actually even argue that marketing's not everything, because when I look back, there was a year where I did, must have been 2013-ish. I randomly woke up one day and was like, I'm going to blog every day for a year, starting on my birthday. So starting that year, when you talk to consistency, I was like, I'm going to blog every single day. I'd been lightly doing it. I love writing. And so I'm going to blog every single day. So I start September 26th and I blog and I blog and I blog. And there was this thing that I was doing sometimes called Facebook. And I was like, by the time I type this up over here from my WordPress website, I could copy and paste it over on Facebook. So I do that for a couple months. And I organically grew. Now, this was back in Facebook's heyday. I'm not saying you can do it now. From like next to nothing to over 400,000. 100% organic, not a single paid anything. No paid ads, no nothing. Like posting consistently, very consistently, answering questions, taking the questions that were asked and making them into my next blog, like again, being really creative about how I was doing it like that. But I didn't do any sales in that time. Now, I'm not saying I didn't sell anything, but what I'm saying is
You didn't make the ask
I didn't make
necessarily.
the ask. Exactly. I didn't make the ask. And I would 100% dig out stats and go to bat with the number of people and no asks versus a much smaller list with asks that are solving someone's problem all day long, I'd pick the smaller lists and the person brave enough to make the ask that's an offer. And they have to see it as an offer. If they see it as salesy, then they're not going to want to do it. But if I'm standing there at a booth and somebody like legitimately saying, you just blew my mind when you showed me how I can teach my horse to back up using a leg cue. And it makes a lot of sense that by doing that, the horse would then think differently. But I'm stretching my own brain right now thinking I can even comprehend that long enough to take it home with me. And I go, yeah, it's actually huge that you have to comprehend it. And if you've just had that dawning realization, you're probably not going to transfer it very well to your horse. But for a $39 DVD, you can re-watch it demonstrated with multiple levels of horses over and over again. That's selling, and that doesn't feel sleazy.
Yeah, you touched on, the selling feeling sleazy is definitely what's hard for people to make the ask. And so what I want people to hear too is you were solving a problem. Like there was a clear problem, there was clear value to what you're doing. So when you know you're helping somebody, it doesn't feel that way, right? Because you know that when they buy that and they watch that, you know the transformation is going to come. You know that their problem is going to be solved in that way. And so that gives you confidence to do that. So
yeah, and you mentioned that stories help. And I remember binge listening to Zig Ziglar, which also dates a lot of this, but I would rent the CD from Cracker Barrel and I would put marketing CDs in, and we would drive all night somewhere with 3 kids in the back, a 6-horse trailer, and when I would take over the shift, everybody would go to sleep while I listened to marketing DVDs overnight. Like, it's crazy. And so, but one of the stories that always stuck with me was, let's say that there's a group of us together, and you come over. Let's say it's a get together, and we don't all know each other, but somebody there coordinated it. And let's say I walk in and I have chocolate chip cookies, and I march up to you and I'm like, "Hey, do you want a warm chocolate chip cookie? Like, I managed to keep them warm on the drive here. Would you like one?" You say no thanks. Well, in that meeting moment, did I feel sleazy selling you the chocolate chip cookie? No. Did you feel offended by me offering you a chocolate chip cookie? Probably not. Now, let's just say that you did. What if I'm like, would you like a chocolate chip cookie? And you're like, I can't believe you just offered me a chocolate chip cookie. Don't you know that I never would eat an ounce of sugar, especially if I don't know whose kitchen it came out of? You'd be like, thank you. And you'd walk away. Did you do anything wrong by offering the chocolate chip cookie?
no, yeah.
And it's like, I really sometimes have to go to these really simplistic versions like that, where it's like, I can't control their reaction, especially online when I don't know people and I'm making offers that feel much more distant than when you're face to face and you can read a lot of body language. But I do have to say that if they don't want my chocolate chip cookie, it doesn't mean I'm a bad human, and it doesn't mean my cookie is a bad cookie. It means they don't want the chocolate chip cookie, and that's okay. And if they lose it while they're delivering their no, that actually says more about them than it does about me.
That's brilliant. I'm probably going to borrow that. Did you?
I heard the
That
cookie
was from the
analogy
Zig
somewhere.
Ziglar. Yeah.
I modified like the
I love
story
it.
of like why, like and I made up the examples because it's so funny because I just asked a coaching client the other day. I'm like, she said something like, it just makes me feel like a bad trainer when if like, and I said, oh, you need to make a list of 30 things that bad trainers do. And she hit a complete roadblock. And I was like, no, you've got to play the game, because what you're doing here is you're not letting your brain. You're afraid of wearing the label of being a bad trainer, and you won't even let yourself see what a bad trainer is. What's a bad trainer? Define it. Define it to yourself. You've got to define it. Right now, your brain just offers you like, bad trainer. I'm like, what does a bad trainer do? When you make that list, you're finding your own values, right? But you're just finding it through a lens of fear. When you think about making offers to people and you make the chocolate chip cookie offer, it's just so much easier if you're like, who on earth would freak out about being offered a chocolate chip cookie? It's way easier to be like, well, if I offer them my DVD, then they could be really freaked
They're
out.
going to be
It's
offended.
actually, they can say no. Or you might be giving them the gift of letting them learn how to say no.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about what I I think the difference between a chocolate chip cookie and a DVD or an online program is the heart that you put into it, right? So like some people, they're not separate from that. Their value is in the program they've created,
Yeah.
if that makes sense, right? So that's like, yeah, the cookie example is beautiful and I love it. But what I'm curious what you would tell somebody is how do they process how it's very different when you've put your heart and soul, your program, your training program, or what your products that you're building out, like that's your heart and soul. And then somebody says no, and you take it personally, which
Mhm.
we would coach them, of course, don't take it personally, but there's a mindset shift that has to happen in there before they can not take it personally when they're so personally connected to this thing that they've created.
Yeah. I would say you have to, instead of saying that you can just shift the way you think about it, I would say you have to first receive what it's like. So I say to you, Denise, would you like to buy my online program? Did this happen face to face or through an email? I don't know. So an email. So let's say it's an email. So it's an email. I send out an email, and Denise unsubscribes to my sale email. And I open up ConvertKit, and thank you, ConvertKit, for displaying my unsubscribes blatantly in my face. My unsubscribes are literally blatantly in my face. And the reason I say that is because I've done my own like email opening therapy by opening up ConvertKit. And what I've learned is that when I see unsubscribes, there's a human part of me that wants everybody to like me. And so I see 18 unsubscribes and I go, oh my gosh, that like hurts. And then I literally open up a journal and write it out because it's the fastest way for me to catch it. And I go like, had 18 unsubscribes. I instantly thought I had a stomach ache. I thought, why in the world do I do it? Like, what's even the point? I should probably never email again. I've done something really wrong. And I write it all out and I go like, man, you sound like a crazy person, but okay, we'll go finish our day. And then what happens is I get an email from LL Beans and I unsubscribe and I think, what the heck? How did that work? How did that work? I unsubscribed or um I signed up for a freebie on how to improve your podcast downloads, and now I'm on their list and I get a bunch of them and I realize I don't really like the way that they're teaching, like it's basically their philosophy. Like when we look at horse trainers, they're going to break out into different types of methods based on, even if you go as far as like, we go like this one's going to clicker train and this one's going to only use this other method. There's like literal method differences. Well, there's communication differences. So I sign up for the freebie, I start getting the emails, and then I unsubscribe. And in the moment that I do the action of unsubscribing, I think, did I really? I didn't have a visceral reaction. I didn't do it against them. I just didn't need another email. And then I make myself make that connection back to that.
Okay, that's good. What I want people to hear too is you allowed yourself to have the emotion and you didn't shame yourself for having that emotion, which this is not therapy, but that's a little bit therapeutic right here. But it's so important because it is okay that you might be, you're going to be disappointed when people say no. We're not saying there's no emotion attached when people say no to your offer, or when you put something out there and you get 2 yeses and you were expecting 20 yeses. It's okay to allow yourself to experience those emotions, but don't let it reflect your value as a person. That's what I think is so, so important people walk away with.
Yeah, I just went to a business conference last weekend, non-horse, just all business, and the woman who runs it brings in $16 million dollars a year. And what she was sharing was that when they get to the part where they're talking about numbers, she does run a membership. When she was talking, she's like, on those days, I can usually only sit through part of it because it just I have such a visceral reaction to the churn and the numbers and all the different things that it's actually she said, I'm to the point now in my business where I have the luxury of being able to walk out and let the team do that. And some weeks I can sit through the whole thing. They always can ask me for numbers and things that I need. And there is so much freedom for me to hear a woman who's making $16 million a year tell me about that. That's the other thing that happens when I have some kind of visceral response to, let's just stick with the same thing, like unsubscribes or something. I can look and go like, she's telling me that her business has scaled that far. But what I also see reflected in her is a woman who greatly cares. And I think when you open yourself up to be a person that greatly cares, it would make sense that you might over care about things that you're making the story mean something more than their inbox was too full, or even literally if they don't resonate with you,
Mhm.
then they're doing you a favor by leaving because they're never going to buy. And for those who don't know, after your list reaches a certain size, you pay to have them on your list. So I can also now look at 18 unsubscribes and be like, that's money that is saved because I don't want thousands of people who are not liking me and not ever going to buy on my list. It's literally mathematically a bad idea.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. I appreciate that practical example. Okay, I have another marketing specific question for you, and then I want to talk about some lessons learned. Thank you for being so generous with your time. If you're okay.
Oh,
All
yeah,
right, so
great.
you've talked about list building, but I've noticed that you don't do a ton of social media right now. Is that right and accurate? Like I haven't looked. I didn't look right before
Yeah.
here, but I have looked before. So talk to me about list building. What does that look like for you? Because most people are thinking if I'm going to be list building, then it means I have to be on social media. You talked about blogging. SEO could be a part of that for some people. Tell me for you, what does that look like?
Yeah. It has shifted a lot over the years, and I think let me start with that and then maybe lead me back onto the path. So like when I did the blogging, it was very like that was what and it was really hard, just like the 3 a.m. email. Like I had to pick a time that like this has to be done by midnight to be in this certain day, and I'm going to blog every day. So therefore, there is a deadline on this, and
Yeah.
I don't even want to go back and count the number of times that I was like right against the deadline. Um, but whatever I picked, I always did really consistently. So, like, I did that year of blogging, which turned into also Facebook for well over a year, which turned into, I also have done stints where if you go to my YouTube channel, I'll pick and do a series. So, like, I did the Trail to the World show, and so I started in, I forget, February, March, or somewhere in the spring. Must have been cold, February, and I was like, "I'm gonna go to the, Western Dressage World Show in September, and I'm gonna put a video out every single week, and that's also gonna go to my email, and then it's gonna do some different." So it had many more layers like that. And then much like when I was going through the burning the candle both at both ends with the horse training and the business, there was a day I looked up and 2 things had happened. Um, I was doing I was posting regularly on Facebook, but the algorithm was changing. And it wasn't displaying as like it didn't just go to everybody the same way that it did. And, and I'd wanted to do podcasting for a long time. And so I started podcasting, and I was podcasting and I was doing both, but there was just this moment when it was a little bit like it had that feeling of burning the candle at both ends. And I just decided to go all in on the podcast. And I'm not necessarily recommending this to people in the way that to say stop posting, but for me, it was what I needed to do in order to fully go in on some other things because that lesson that was hard learned for burning the candle at both ends, I'm much less likely to do that same level of burning the candle at both ends for a long time. And what I figured out was that I already had a large following that I had never taken deeper.
Okay. Yeah.
And podcasting takes people deeper. I knew that because I'm addicted to podcasts, and I suspected it and I started doing it. And the podcasting just there was something about the depth that I really wanted, and it has converted really well. I probably have had the luxury of having accidentally done all the building of the YouTube channel and the Facebook page and the national recognition, all that stuff. So the podcasting worked in a way that I'm not saying necessarily would if you just had no following and you started the podcast. So then it converted really well. So the confessions to a marketing expert. I promise I am planning on starting back on my social media again. And
Zero
it really
judgment
truly is a
here.
good idea.
Zero judgment.
It truly is a good idea. But here's one other thing that I believe is that one of the reasons mine worked so well is because I was really willing to engage heavily in the comments and really talk. And I also have a line in the sand. I'm not willing to post if I'm not willing to have the conversations and to follow up. And so the slapping something up there that could take me 15 minutes I won't let myself do it in a way I don't want to do it in, and I want to be, in a space where I will follow up on the comments. That's what worked before, and it's what I believe will work again.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And I appreciate that. And that's a beautiful lead into my next question. Because as I shared, very much, I want equestrian entrepreneurs to build a business that meets their version of success. Now, I don't say that and mean like, you don't need to make money. It's not that. Like, yes, you need to build a profitable business and I want it to be sustainable. It's not going to be sustainable if long term you're burning the candle at both ends. If long term you're not making a profit because you're not marketing. So sustainable is key and success being subjective is key. That in mind, I would love to know if you're having coffee with a fellow entrepreneur. And now I wouldn't say this is someone that's just started their business, but maybe someone who's finally getting serious about marketing.
Okay.
Give me some of the maybe 2 or 3 lessons that you would share with them that we can share with our podcast listeners.
Okay. I'm gonna recap one. Don't have a heart attack when you watch numbers. Like,
Mhm.
don't have a heart attack when you watch numbers, because it turns out that when you start caring about focusing on it, you start not knowing what they mean, and then you start assigning all these different meanings. So I 100% agree. You have to make some markers that are gonna count long term. And for sure, for me, total income generated is the baseline one, not because it's everything, but that will help you know whether it's because a small following can generate the income you want, or a large following can never be monetized. Like, you can do either extreme. That means that it would be a good idea to at least have a basic budget of what you're aiming for and then start tracking enough to get there, because I find that number game is more beneficial than assuming that a certain number of followers will produce that income, because you have to find your own voice. You have to find what works. Like, some people are amazing at picking up the phone and just talking straight to camera. And that is not nearly as comfortable to me as like podcasting. So it wouldn't matter how many tutorials I took. I need to do what's going to work for me, because if it doesn't work for me, it's also not going to convert, because it's not going to be authentic if I'm having a heart attack. So don't look at the numbers and of like unsubscribes, open rates, whatever, in a way that hurts you. Look at it long term. So I see it every time I open it up, but I want to know it more over like a quarter, or like I want to know it over a little longer time. Is it trending down? Is it trending up? And then you
Mhm.
can start to get more detailed. I definitely know that bigger companies look at things weekly, but I would say that if it's somebody like that, it's like, pick a direction at least for a full-blown quarter or a full-blown year or something to that effect, and kind of roll with it and figure out those pieces as you go with numbers.
That is so good. I've started having my coaching clients create a custom dashboard for them so we can assign like what are the things we're going to track on a monthly basis. And to your point, also realizing we want to track like how we're feeling. Like are we feeling successful and impactful and things like that. So we don't assign that to the numbers. So I love that. So good. All right, what else do you have?
I'm gonna add a little bit to that, because what you just said, when I'm telling people to track numbers, I tell them to always track numbers that are fully in their control.
Mm, yeah.
Which makes people a little bit like, "What? What do you mean? I can't control how many people like it." I'm like, "You're correct, you can't, but you can control how many times you post. You can control a lot of different things that have a side effect of that, but all you can really like, if you get to the end of the month and you 100% executed on what you said you were gonna do, you need to give yourself credit for that, and then review the numbers through a, 'Is this working, or would I pivot something here?' frame."
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I don't know I won't remember right now what book this is from, but I've talked in the podcast about lead measures and lag measures. Have you heard of
Yes.
that?
I
So it's kind of that premise. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll try to find that podcast episode where I dive into it. But yeah, very much. That's so very important. Good.
Yeah, because like podcasts feel like a long game. Like podcasts, like it's like there's a lot of things where it's like people. What are the numbers now? They have to consume like how many hours of content and how many offers. It's like the
Yeah,
number
it's like
keeps
8
growing.
touches.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and the numbers just keep getting bigger, and it's like,
Mhm.
so there. I have a lot of things out there like YouTube or things like that, like those things like those little episodic like Trail to the World show, or Stacy's Video Diary Jack. It's also fun because they sit there and they do the work
Mhm.
years after I took the time to
Yeah.
produce them.
Mhm.
Okay. So, definitely, another thing would be, if we're having coffee, I would say, don't look at where I am 28 years in. and, try to jump here. Don't be like, oh, I must need a podcast and I must need a whatever. Like, because I tried to outline like a bunch of the different weird things that I did all the way through, and I'm still doing them. I mean, it's not like it's like many, many years ago. I'm still very willing to do things that feel messy or ugly. And I think people look from the outside and they're like, oh, that person has this YouTube channel, or that person has a podcast, or that person, that must be the way. Um, there's going to be steps and steps. So I would say that would be another thing. I would say, be really generous with whatever your sample is. So for me, it's like I teach generously, and then I have this confidence that what people are typically buying is support or help in applying it. So it opens me up to really teach generously, and to the point where, I mean, I actually like getting emails from people who listen to my podcast who go, "Oh my gosh, you can't believe how much you've changed my relationship with my horse." And on the surface, it looks like, "Oh, no, I didn't charge for that or whatever." But if what I spoke into the microphone was enough to transform their life, first of all, good on me for speaking that clearly. Good on them for applying it. And then a lot of times they do that. They do that sample and they do that. And then later on, they get to a spot where either they can financially afford it, or they have a goal or a dream or a problem, and then I am the first on their mind to come do that. So I think there's a freedom in doing that. And I was thinking about it. I was thinking about coming on the podcast and some of the examples, and I was thinking the store that I made my saddle with essentially does the same thing. So if you want to buy the saddle, you're going to click on Stagecoach West's website and you're going to buy the saddle, but they essentially have a really good return policy. So you could order my saddle and they're in New York and you could be in Iowa, and you're going to buy the saddle. They're going to send the saddle to you. You can ride in the saddle for like, I forget how long, 14 days or whatever. And if you don't like it, you send it back and you get your refund minus like $200 shipping fee or something like that. Like it's how many times do people go, I don't know if the saddle's going to fit. I don't know, whatever. It's like, I connected with a person who has essentially the same mindset of like, how can you educate or give? How can you actually want to solve this problem? Not like, sorry, you bought it. Too bad.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. I love that. Well, a couple of things when you talked about that would come to mind in terms of how you serve people is providing value, right? So like the pucks, you by providing that value and by helping to solve those problems, they are trusting you more and more. And so then when you do have a different offer that meets that or takes them deeper, then they've already inherently got that trust in you. And so again, the key to effective marketing is building that trust. So while I know you've heard this, that people will say, people buy from who they know, like, and trust. And there are many opinions about that. But the reality is, at the end of the day, you might not like them. But do you trust that what they're saying is what you're going to get? Like if you say, I'm going to sell you an apple and I give you money and you give me an orange, well, I trusted you to give me an apple and you gave me an orange. I'm less likely to buy, whether I like you or not, so you are building trust as you provide those results. So I think that's beautiful. And I'm going to tap on one that you said earlier, but I want to bring back to is that relationships. For those that are listening and thinking marketing is just what you put out there online, and marketing is just what you create and content and print ads and expos and booths and all those things. At the end of the day, if you're not building any relationships, it's going to be much harder to build a sustainable business.
yeah, definitely. I think that there is so much online and you can have so much reach, but definitely in-person stuff. I could do all of my business stuff online with no in-person, and I invite my students to come in because there is a difference in that personal touch. And so I love the relationship building in many different levels. And, we email, we stay in touch. I know their horses. I ask about them. They tell me when different things happen. That's still very relationally happening here. And I think sometimes if you're looking at somebody who's doing like a online horse type business, they don't necessarily expect that, but that's still happening. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love that because you're right. A lot of times when people think it's online only, they forget about that relational aspect, but just so key. All right, friend, you have shared lots of really great advice and help for those listening. I always end with just an open ended question in case there was something on your radar that you're like, no, I really wanted to make sure people know or understand this as they build their business. Is there anything else that you wanted to address before we say goodbye?
Yes, I might even squeeze in 2.
Okay, go for
So,
it.
when I was just thinking about the other thing, I think when people think about sales, you have to, at least, even if you never publish it anywhere, even if you don't do anything with it because you're having a heart attack about the idea that you're doing a sales page or something that might be salesy. When you're doing it, I think it's a huge mistake to assume. I know because I've made this mistake many times before. When you're the creator, so let's say I sit down and I edit for 160 hours to create this program I'm going to sell. The greatest weakness I have at that moment is I know it so well that I assume when I say, this steering course is great, that you understand what that means. And let's say I go even a little bit deeper and I say, I name like 4 things, 5 things, 6 things. I think people underestimate in the sales process what it means to be clear about what they're getting and what you are offering, because you're so in it. When you're building it, you're so in it that for you, it's this, you know it all, so you forget to say it.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
the cutest story about it, I remember my son's coming home, and they said the teacher told us, she was standing in front of the class, she had peanut butter jelly, and she had bread, and she said, "Okay, write down the instructions for how I make this peanut butter and jelly sandwich," and the kids all wrote it down, and then she proceeded to follow their instructions. And so she stood up in front of the class, and, they're young, they were like, "You put the peanut butter on the bread." So she took the peanut butter jar and set it on top of the loaf of bread in the plastic. And she went piece by piece through each one of them and followed the directions that the children had given her. And nobody said, open the jar. Nobody said, use the knife. And it's just such a great illustration of, like, we assume that they know what the online course looks like, what they're going to be expected to do, how many hours they're expected to ride, when they can start to. We know it because we literally built it, but we don't convey it. And that, to me, might be the strongest thing about sales, is just literally being able to convey that so that they can make an informed decision. And that's where, for me, it doesn't feel salesy anymore.
That's so good. That was only one. You said you had 2.
I do.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Then I would just I'll just backpack that one and say, yes, I agree 1,000%. You cannot replace clarity and making assumptions. Yeah. I love that advice. That's so good. All right. What's your second one?
Reinvention, repeat, reinvention, repeat, and reinvent.
Are you saying that's advice? Or are you saying just be open to it, or tell me what you mean?
All of the above. It circles back to the idea that I said earlier. I think there's freedom when you think that you don't have to get it all right this first time. So it's like you build something, and let's use a more recent example for me. So I edit for, if you haven't figured it out yet, a lot of hours, and I put it together, and I'm so happy, and I sell it, and I start doing things, and then 3 or 4 years later, or thousands of people go through, and you start realizing they need a different level of something, but I've got to make some changes to that. And if you label it as a reinvention, as you label it as it's like I see people who want to throw it all out and start again. And that's, it might feel like a level of that, but you got to watch the mindset on it, because it's very much like, when I say that I took my DVDs, pulled them into a digital form, and put them online. I didn't throw them away. I moved them over. And what happens accidentally is when people think about, I did that wrong, well, they're already in a mindset, versus I'm like, I've learned a few things in the last 3 years. Maybe I need a version 2.0 of this. And then I'm going to tell people why there's a version 2.0. And it's not because the last one was broken and had to be thrown out. It's because I know how to teach it better, because I'm still open and learning. And I didn't have to get it perfect the first time, because I hope if I look up 4 years from now, I'm a different person than I am today.
Yeah. That's so good for everyone listening, regardless of what it is that you're selling. Just the mindset of that around your business, it frankly can save your business. If you have that kind of mindset, it can save your business. So I hope that those listening will take that to heart. That's really, really good. All right, Stacy, thank you so much. Before we go, tell everybody where they can find you online so they can connect with you, see what you're doing, listen to the podcast, all the things. And they will not judge you when they go to your social media and there's not a ton there.
Thank you for telling me that. The best place to find me is stacywestfall.com. I'm trying out a new marketing quiz so they can take the quiz and
Ooh,
get
fun.
the results.
Okay.
And or you can find me on Train Your Own Horse with Stacy Westfall on all the podcast places. And you can go to my very inactive social media accounts, which are all Stacy Westfall.
Perfect. I will link to all of those things on the show notes so it's easy to find. Thank you again. I really appreciate your generosity and your heart to share the ins and outs and the behind the scenes and the hard and the good of business building. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You guys, can I just tell you, as I was re-listening to some of this conversation to put this episode together for you, I was just reminded what a blessing it is to get to have Stacy here sharing her experience and her story and her lessons learned with you. I really truly hope that you are walking away with at least one thing that you're ready to apply in your horse business. And if you're thinking, Denise, there's so many things I need help picking just one, I'm going to give you 3 to consider based on today's conversation. But certainly there may be things that you pulled out that I don't mention here. And so I would love to hear from you. Share this episode on social media, tag Storm Lily Marketing, tag Stacy, even though she's not super active right now, it will eventually show up to her. And let me know what you learned in this episode or the previous, and send me a message. I would love to hear from you guys what your takeaways are. But for now, I'm going to give you 3, okay? Number 1, a reminder that you can choose your platform with purpose. I know the pressure to be everywhere is real. And so I want to give you permission to choose the platform and the method of marketing and communicating with your audience that best suits where you are, what your capacity is, and what your goals are for your business. So based on that conversation and based on this takeaway, I want you to go look at what you're currently doing and ask yourself what feels sustainable, what feels aligned for you right now. Give yourself permission to not do the things that are draining you and not giving you an ROI when it comes to your business, and instead double down on what's actually working. All right, the second takeaway I have for you is, again, permission. And this one is permission to do your horse business your way. One of the refreshing things that I love about Stacy's approach to business building is her emphasis and freedom to create a business that works for her, and the same for you as an equestrian entrepreneur. All right. So even her saying, look, I do a lot of my own content creation. I do produce my own podcast. That doesn't mean we're saying that's what everyone needs to do. I want you to have permission to do your horse business in a way that meets your version of success and helps you to build the business that you've been dreaming of, because it is not the same for everybody. All right. So that means you have permission, friend, to build a marketing strategy that fits your lifestyle, fits your business, and acknowledge there is no such thing as one size fits all. All right. The third takeaway, this final one, is for you to focus on connection in your marketing, not just conversions. Now, you heard us talk about sales and marketing, and both are very important. And for sure, if you're not selling, you're not likely to have a sustainable business that'll be around for the long term. But what I want you to remember is selling is not just about conversions. Those matter. Data matters, but people matter too. The connection you have with your audience matters as well. So as you build your equine business, I want you to shift from just how do I sell and how do I make more money to how can I serve my audience? And as you do that and make the ask, then you will start to see more of those sales. All right, so those are my 3 for you to consider if you're looking for a takeaway that you can immediately apply. But if you had other notes, as I said, I want to hear from you. Now, one thing I didn't say that's so fun is that Stacy is actually in the National Cowgirl Hall of Fame. As I was reviewing all my notes and my intros, I realized I always let my guests tell you about themselves. And so they're often and typically so humble that they're not going to pat themselves on the back and tell you all their accolades. And we did talk about Road to the Horse and those accolades, but I also think it's really fun to know that Stacy is in the National Cowgirl Hall of Fame. And another fun fact is that she was inducted the same year as another podcast guest, Barbara Schulte. It's been a few years now since Barbara joined me on the podcast to share her journey of business building and some takeaways for you guys. So I'm going to link to Barbara's episodes in the show notes as well. But in case you're trying to go straight there, you can go to episodes 70 and 71. Barbara's is another conversation that I broke into two parts because it was so meaty and I wanted to make sure you got all the meat from it. So again, I'll have those links on the show notes for today, which is stormlily.com/176, or you can scroll all the way through to 2022 and find Barbara, or you can just head to my website and I've got the links for you there. Okay, I promised you one last thing and I have one more. I'm so sorry, but I want to make sure you have all the good things, especially after this conversation with Stacy. I'm sure you're feeling inspired and motivated. And if you're wondering, Denise, I just don't know actually which step to take in terms of marketing. Like I'm going to dial down, but help me figure out who my people are and where do I dial into? I want you to grab my free guide for equestrian entrepreneurs. Okay. If you go to stormlily.com/success, then you're going to get my free guide that's going to help you to simplify marketing because I'm breaking it down into 4 steps that will help you to successfully market your horse business, even if you get horses more than marketing. So even if you're like, Denise, I am not lit up about marketing the same way Stacy is, that's okay. I've got you covered. Okay. So go grab my free guide and it's going to help give you those steps to getting started if you're feeling overwhelmed, or even steps to clarity. You might be saying, Denise, I've been in business for a long time, but I'm just getting started with really getting serious about marketing. This free guide is going to help you out. So go and grab that. Stay subscribed to the podcast because I'm going to continue to bring you new episodes, new friends, and people to learn from. And I want to make sure you don't miss one. All right. Thanks again for joining me here today. I hope you have an amazing day.